Stephen, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this program. And the theme being Be Bold is very exciting to me because it's that one thing that I believe we all need to be a little bit more of, and that's bold in our actions. So I have some slides here. I'm going to glance at those from time to time. What I'd like for you to do as a listener is grab some paper and a pen, pencil, take some notes, because the more you put this down in front of you, the better and easier it will be for you to remember. And I'm going to ask you to jot something down, and I promise at the end of this, we'll go back to this. And so you'll need this in your notes. Write this down, and write it down in the first person. My job is to be present to the moment. My job is to be present to the moment. That's a bold statement. And we're going to get right into exactly what it might mean for you. So let's go to this first slide. The objectives for this evening's workshop, the objectives for this workshop is to bring about a behavioral change using your creativity. And we hear people say all the time that, well, I'm not very creative. But if you use more of your brain power to be creative, you're using more of the right side of your brain than you are the left side of your brain in the creative process. The left side of your brain, for an example, does all the logical stuff, the math, the words you speak. The creative side, on the other hand, brings you the thoughts, the ideas, helps you use your imagination. So we also are going to spend a little bit of time talking about the difference between persuasion and manipulation. And we'll say to you that we're going to help you develop your persuasive skills, because you have persuasive skills, and the more they're developed, the easier it's going to be for you to get through life in many situations, because there's a little kernel of truth here that I think can be useful to you. You want to develop an extraordinary ability to listen. So listening skills become a huge part of what you want to be able to do and do well. When we're in a communication, you are 100% responsible for the communication you're in, as is the other party in that communication. You both have 100% responsibility. And the best way to manage that is to have great listening skills. And finally, we want to teach you what you need to learn in order for you to be present to the moment and be more successful in all of your endeavors. So as we move forward with this, we're going to look at three things that are extremely important to you. Three things that are extremely important to you. If you want to be bolder, you have to have vision, a mission, and values. And the values that you have were put in place very early on. And those fundamental values are what you use to get through the day, get through your life. And as you go through each portion of your life, you'll get to that place where your values will shift or they'll change. Here's an example. When I was 25 years old, I wanted a sports car. And I had one. And it was a fun car to drive. It was a Corvette with 3 two-barrel carburetors. And it would absolutely fly. Well, a few years went by, and I find myself with kids. My wife and I had beautiful children, and now we needed not a sports car. We needed a minivan. And so I invested in a minivan, and I drive one of those to this day, because now it's grandkids. And my children who, I would never, please drop me off here. Don't drop me off in front of school in this van. And yet today, all of my children have vans to haul their families around in. So vision, mission, and values. The values we have at 25 are different than the values that we have at 35 and 40 and beyond. And we all are on a mission. And the mission that we're on is to live out our life in a fundamental way that brings our Christian principles into play, into practice. Because that's what really helps us through life, is knowing that God is in charge. And when you have a mission to serve and to build others up, you're doing what you need to be doing. And you spell that out in a vision statement and in a mission statement, and you use your values, and you use your values to bring it to life. So I'm going to suggest to you that you find a good coach or mentor, because mentoring matters. And the reason it matters is there's about 7 areas in your life. And if you have someone that coaches you or mentors you in these 7 areas of your life, there's a real high value that comes out of developing each of those areas. Physical, mental, spiritual, social, financial, career, family. Those 7 areas are extremely important. And when you think about all of the activity in your life, it falls into one of those 7 categories. Now imagine how much better each one of those would be for you if you had a coach or a mentor to help you through it. So I urge you to recognize how important it is to have a mentor and to have a coach. Differences between manipulation and persuasion. I said we would talk about persuasive skills. So let's get right to it. There's a real difference between manipulation and persuasion. When you use the power of persuasion, it must, and I repeat the word must, have an outcome that benefits the person you're trying to persuade. Because if it doesn't have a benefit, it's manipulation. And there's something very wrong about manipulating someone. Manipulation has a single focus. I really don't care what happens to you. I'm only interested in what happens to me. That's manipulation. And we manipulate. And sadly, there's a lot of manipulation going on all the time because people get wrapped up in themselves. And when they do, they forget that there needs to be a benefit for the person you are trying to persuade. And persuasive skills has a multi-focus. It means that you and this other person are both going to benefit. Now, the person you're trying to persuade may not recognize that there's a benefit for them. And part of your responsibility to them is to help them see something they may or may not be able to see. Write this down in your notes. I have a responsibility to you, not for you. And if you keep that little caveat in place when you're trying to persuade someone, it will be and bring out the benefit for both of you. So you need personal character to be really good at being persuasive. You also need to be in the right mood to persuade, because the mood you are in is reflected in all that you say and do. And you have to have proof that there is a value for this person you're trying to persuade. And when you do that, it makes the whole thing work well. Here are some persuasive behaviors that you want to engage in, and engage in them as often as you can. Make yourself very credible. It's always better to be truthful in all things. And when you're trying to persuade someone, you want to be able to know the interest of the other person. So the interests of others are extremely important to you. You create a positive climate. You convince yourself first. You convince yourself that what you have to offer does indeed have a value for the person that you're trying to persuade. Ask great questions. The better the questions you ask, the more effective you will get at getting great answers. And I've had people argue with me about this. I wrote a book many years ago called Better Questions, Better Answers. and someone said, well, just because you ask a question doesn't mean you're going to get a good answer. And I said, well, think about that for a minute. It's the quality of the question that improves the quality of the answer. So you might want to think in terms of asking the best question that you possibly can ask, and you'll get a better answer. Be clear and well organized. The more organized you are, the easier it is to accept your persuasive argument. And be open to feedback. One of the biggest mistakes people make is asking for feedback and then explaining themselves when feedback is given to them. And that, my friends, is the fastest way to shut down any feedback. So be open to feedback, meaning that whether you agree or disagree with what you're hearing, the only response is, thank you. That gives me something to think about. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Those are simple little things that you feed back to the feeder of feedback. And never say, well, here's the reason I did that. When they give you a tip of some kind that they feel is valuable, and you say, well, here's the reason I did that. You shut down the feedback and you won't get any more. So be ready and be aware that you have to be open to feedback. Deal with your fears and assumptions. Fears and assumptions. Fear is false evidence appearing real. A little acronym, FEAR, that tells us we have to be careful when we assume. Well, I thought, you said. Those are assumptions. So you want to get as much clarity as you can, and the clarity comes from the value of your communication. Let others draw their own conclusions. That's really the best way to put your argument out there, and then let that person come to their own conclusions. And if they say no, it means no now. It doesn't mean no forever. It means that no is a decision they're making at this time. At another time, they could say yes. You don't browbeat them or push them into something they don't want to do, but you're very much aware that you deal with your fears. You attempt to make an environment safe enough so they have no fear, and then you never assume. And finally, look at persuasion and persuasive behaviors as creative options. And you're always wanting to try to have a set of options that are going to be useful and helpful to your listeners. And then you better celebrate, because when you and this person come to an agreement, and because there is something of value for them in this, you can celebrate. Discipline to forgive. God forgives us all, and we've all been forgiven if we surrender and if we ask for it. So it's important for us to recognize that we have to discipline ourselves to forgive, because human beings do not forgive like God forgives us. And we're not God. We never will be God. But what we can be is as close to being like Him as we can be by being as forgiving as we can possibly be. So devote more attention to your values. That's a great way to construct and build the ability to forgive. Repurpose your revenge energy. Everybody has it, or has the capacity for it. You just have to be careful. Don't use revenge energy. Instead, turn that around. Repurpose that energy. You only get one energy. How you use it becomes extremely important. Forgive yourself first. We punish ourselves more than God wants to punish us. If He forgives us, we have to be reminded of our unwillingness to forgive ourselves. So by forgiving yourself first, you learn how to forgive others. And that's a valuable lesson to learn. The other suggestion and recommendation that we make is that you adapt to a no strings attached philosophy. No strings attached. See forgiveness as the gift that you give yourself, as the gift that you can give others. And when you do that, what you're making certain happens is there are no strings attached. Here's an example. You get a Christmas gift, and you accept the gift, and the person who gives it to you continually asks you if you like it. Now, that's a string attached because they're wanting an accolade for something that they gave freely. So it's important for us to participate in giving, period. And when you give forgiveness, there are no strings attached. And that is true of any gift, but the gift of forgiveness, it becomes extremely important. I'm saying you can't say, well, I forgive you, but I'll never forget. Really? If God forgets, why can't we as human beings forget? The new model. You change your behavior if you want to be bold. You change your behavior if you want to be present to the moment. You align your perception, your reality, and your attitude into these new behaviors. And then the beginnings of an opportunity occur simply because you have a new model. And as a new model presents itself and you see your world different than you saw it before, that's indeed what perception is, your reality and the reality of those around you changes. If you're a boss, a manager, a supervisor, and you go into work grumpy, the people you manage or supervise know you're grumpy, and they will avoid you on that day. And if you had decided to have a great day and you walked in, everybody would be as cheerful as you are demonstrating you are. So that's something to think about when you think about your reality. Your reality is what you make it. And if you're joyful in all things, it means you have an attitude of gratitude. And an attitude is a mental habit. And if you took the word attitude, A-T-T-I-T-U-D-E, and you took the value of each letter as it appears in the alphabet, and you, for an example, A has a value of 1. A is the first letter in the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E. E has a value of 5. If you did that for each letter in the word attitude, and you added it up, it would come to 100%. And you and I are both responsible for our attitude 100%. And when you start feeling frustrated or aggravated with somebody else, tell yourself, I own these feelings and I can shift or change my attitude. And that's how beginnings turn into opportunities. And new beginnings come from a new model. Ask yourself these 3 questions. Am I indifferent in any way regarding other people's concerns? Do I just blow off what somebody else has said to me, or do I take it into account? That's a great question to ask yourself, not just in this moment, but from now on. Do I become upset because I'm impatient? Now, I find myself still struggling with my patience. I am not a patient person, but I need to be. And you know who I need to be most patient with? Me. If you are patient with yourself, the value comes from what you understand patience to be. Here's the 3rd question, and a good one. Do I always see interactions with others as an opportunity to build my reputation as a person of influence, as a leader? And you say, oh, I'm not a leader. You know, I just teach school. Well, you're teaching school, you're in a leadership role. All of us are in a leadership role. Someone is looking at us and focusing their attention on us, and they see us in a leadership role. So, do I always see interactions with others as an opportunity to build my reputation as a person of influence? And a person of influence is one who is transparent, authentic, willing to share their faith, willing to say that they know God's in charge. All of those things can be of high value. And I urge you to take these 3 questions and ask yourself these 3 questions often. Go back to feedback for just a minute. There's some guidelines for getting great feedback. And we said that the way to shut it down is to start explaining why you do what you do when someone gives you feedback with regard to what you do. So you may have to listen to that a couple of times to catch it, but I know, because I live it, that that is what really makes feedback work for you or work against you. You have to be willing to accept it. So minimize I. The next thing to do is listen more than you talk. And that's a tough one. And here tonight, I'm doing all the talking and you're doing all the listening. But I promise you that if you put these things into practice, it'll bring value to your life. Confirm what you think the person said. All right, so we're in a conversation and this is what I think you said. And you repeat what you think they said. And if they say, yeah, that's it, you were a great listener. If they say, well, this is what I meant, that's fine. But don't go back and say, well, you said. No, just say, okay, that's great, thanks. Thanks for the clarification. Avoid assumptions. Get rid of them. Remember we said they don't serve you at all. And ask for opinions. I need your opinion. Give me your impression of this. What are your thoughts on this? And whether you agree or disagree with what's being told to you, the value is found in your willingness to ask for an opinion. Refrain from explaining yourself. Explaining yourself is good for you. It may not be good for anyone else. So just keep that as a thought. Have your objectives in requesting feedback. When you ask someone for feedback, you want to lay out what it is you're looking to learn. And when you get great feedback, it's because someone has taken an interest in the things that you're interested in. And you and this person then can have a great conversation. You can have a great relationship because you are really open and honest with each other. Always follow up. Always pick up the phone, drop an email, write a text. Get back to the person that you're interacting with. Always follow up. You know, 2 weeks ago, we had that conversation. You gave me some feedback, and I put some of it to use, and I got to tell you, it worked terrific. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you for that. It makes a difference. This becomes extremely important. Aristotle said the highest good for a man is self-realization. And I believe that to be true. But he also said some things that were brilliant. And at the same time, he said some things that were not so brilliant. He believed that people needed to be independent. And I think independence is great. And I think there's a place for independence. But I believe more fully in the fact that we were wired for relationships. And we need to interact with others. And we need to be able to count on others, depend on each other, and help each other get from where we are to where we want to go. Knowing your strength and how you learn and think and acting on this knowledge is the key to performance. And that comes from a gentleman named Peter Drucker, who was a person who all over the world gave business advice. And in all of that business advice, he always advised that you find your spiritual self and grow your spiritual self. So I want you to hang in there. This is our website, www.aimyoursights. We have a survey on that site, and you can invest in that survey for about $60. You can get a brain pathway, which will give you some information on how you take in information. It will also give you some information on how you put information together, and it will determine whether you're a global or a sequential thinker or a combination of the two. And that can be very useful to you in addition to learning about how you take that information in from a learning standpoint. Is it visual, auditory, or is it kinesthetic or empathetic? And those three things can help you really accelerate what you're trying to accomplish. Take a look at it. It's right there on Aim Your Sights. It's called Brain Pathways. And if that's something that you're interested in, drop me a note and you and I can talk about it. I'd be happy to visit with you about the results, which you get at the end of the survey, about a 15-page report that's immediately generated for you. I hope you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed doing it for you. God bless. I hope that you tune in again.